Welcome to Vintage Farmhouse Antiques and Blue Willow China. This is a special we're producing to show you the variation in the Blue Willow pattern that's occurred over the years. I'm going to talk to you about its history, how it was inspired by a group of English pottery owners from the Chinese landscape blue and white patterns that were being imported en masse during the 17th century. So let's look in detail at some of these pieces, the history that inspired the development and creation of the Blue Willow China we all love and use today. I'm going to take you right the way back to 1750s, 1760s, when the English had a thriving tea trade with China. And the vessels that were coming over needed some ballast, basically, and an ideal thing to put as ballast in the base of your tea clipper was Chinese porcelain. It had the edge over the English China being produced at the time. Hard-paced porcelain, it was robust, it was tough, it was waterproof and ideal for putting in the base of ships to give them stability and fill the upper segments with tea. This is an example of a little Chinese tea bowl, an export Chinese tea bowl in porcelain from around that period. Chinese landscape design, some elements of blue willow in it, little willow tree here, but none of the characteristic three elements that were going to become so famous as blue willow. What it has got is, you'll hear the term moth border. Just look at that little bit of design in there. Let me bring that in to the camera. Looks just like a butterfly, tip of my finger. And this is what is quite often described as moth border design on classic old Chinese porcelain. And this was copied by the English design team. Who was it that came up with blue and white china? Wow, let's see if we can find out. Well, there are three very famous potters' names associated with the development of blue willow pattern. One is Thomas Turner, the other is Josiah Spode, and the third is Minton. Who came up with the design? I don't think there is any documented history that any particular one did, but they were all working at the same period, around 1780, 1790, and the key edge that was developing at this time, which allowed them to get this business, was the fact that the English had imposed import taxes on Chinese export ware. There was a war just about to start with France, which made the import of Chinese goods by sea problematic. And the third and perhaps the most critical element in the whole equation was the development of hard-paced porcelain technology, initially at Corley and Davenport and Chelsea, and then that technology basically spread throughout the potteries. So they were starting to produce some really good quality hard porcelain. This is an early example, not quite blue willow. It's got a lot of the elements of blue willow in it. This is probably made by Corley and it's marked confusingly as willow, but it does not have all the concise elements that you would expect with blue willow. This piece from around the same period, made by Spode, again, looks at first glance very like blue willow, but it hasn't got all the elements. It's got a pagoda. Where's the willow tree? It hasn't got a willow tree. Has it got a pine tree? No. Has it got two birds looking into each other's eyes? No. Has it got the jagged picket fence? No. Two figures on the bridge as opposed to three. Lovely moth border design here. Just look at that. See how that from the original Chinese have been developed through. This one's made by Spode. This is Spode's variation on the willow design, often referred to as Broseley 2 or 2 temples. It's got all those elements, but not in the right combination to make it exactly blue willow china. But this is the thing. If you research this, you find that there are so many variations on willow pattern, temples pattern, Chinese landscape pattern, and Broseley, that these potters were coming up with variations to try and compete with one another for the developing English market, and this is what they were coming up with at these periods in time. Now we've got two more early pieces of Broseley or Two Temples China to show you here. Both, I think, coming out of the same factory, but maybe at slightly different periods. The reason we think these are coming out of the same manufacturing plant is the transfer design. Now, you can't always be certain of that because quite often these transfer designs were licensed out and shared between different porcelain factories. But this one you can see the elements, particularly in the fence at the foreground here, if you look at that, and the border design with the round rims on it are almost identical in these two designs. However, the porcelain, just look at the grittiness of this. Early deep rim on this one, what looks like a fake Chinese mark, and that's something you do have to be aware of. This could be Chinese export, but the English were not au fait with not putting a Chinese fake stamp on the back to try and make these look like what had been extremely popular and sold really well, the Chinese import ware. This one, completely different. Smooth, underglaze, good thick glaze, not as deep a rim. This is probably later. And this probably shows the development that was occurring in the development of hard paste and glaze technologies during that period of production. Two more examples here. One on the left isn't Blue Willow. Nice piece of Davenport which has got all the elements of the Blue Willow. So let's show you that one first, shall we? Willow tree, pine tree, two birds looking into each other's eyes, picket fence in the foreground, pagoda, and a bridge with three characters making their way over it, and a boat. That's the key elements to Blue Willow. The border design will vary between different manufacturers and different styles and dates, but all those key elements need to be present. It won't always be present on small pieces of china. They couldn't literally squeeze all those elements in, so you will still come across pieces of china marked as willow which haven't got all those key elements, but on flatware, large surfaces, if it's Blue Willow, they should all be present. This one's got some outer decoration around its outer wall. Nice piece of early Davenport, quite badly stained having said that. This, at first glance, you may think is Blue Willow. Certainly got the pagoda or temple. No bridge, no birds, no picket fence, no willow tree, no pine tree. It's actually a Chinese landscape design. Again, English, made by John Heath around 1845 to 1853, and this just shows how much variation was being produced by the English porcelain and earthenware manufacturers based on what was important and popular commercial pattern. So these variations were being produced to serve the market, which was now almost entirely Staffordshire and English produced china. Now the Blue Willow pattern has been produced by just about all the major 20th century china factories in England, and this is an example of Booth's Real Old Willow A8025, made during probably the first half of the 20th century. But again, although this is real old willow, they used some artistic license, and again, even on this flatware saucer, they haven't included all the elements that you expect to completely make it Blue Willow. No picket fence in the right position, has got the willow tree, but it's a stylized willow tree. Little boat, two birds certainly, but not absolutely everything. And again, on the teacup, there's no room for them to squeeze the picket fence or other elements into the design, but they've done their best. So you have to make some allowance and have a look at the china marks to see what elements are there and whether this is Blue Willow, Two Temples, or Broseley. Again, all the same variation of a single English design based on these Chinese-inspired blue and white porcelain designs of the 17th century, which were being imported into the country by the English East India Company as ballast to support their ships, bringing the valuable cargo, which was tea. Thanks for watching.